Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal, where as you can see, for the first time in quite a long time, or it certainly feels like quite a long time, I'm joined by James Benge of CBS for this week's Inside Arsenal Extra Time. Jack, I was going to say hello stranger, but you're not actually being a stranger because I have seen you a few times recently in some games. But certainly in this sort of setting, it feels like it's been a long time, isn't it, since we've sat down and done one of these. How have you been?
Yeah, you kept abandoning me, didn't you? You went off on your holidays and then you went to your sick bed. I mean, I don't know if you're the one to blame for this bug that the whole Arsenal first team have been playing with, but I certainly think you might be.
I'm getting blamed for pretty much everything else at the moment, mate.
Yeah.
So it may as well just throw one other thing on to blame me and to hit me with. Go for it. No, yeah, apologies.
Do you not think this is? I keep seeing a lot of sort of nostalgia for Unai Emery's Arsenal. That I really think. God, you people didn't make the flights to Baku, didn't you? You didn't spend a night on the floor of Istanbul airport waiting for Unai Emery to let you down. And I feel like blaming you and me and a few other journalists for everything that's wrong with Arsenal really is sort of these fans' ways of getting back into that nostalgic vibe for Emery Arsenal. It is all our fault.
It is all our fault. It is all our fault, obviously. But I think that sort of paints a bigger picture, doesn't it? This sort of air of frustration that is around Arsenal at the moment. Certainly on the back of Tuesday night. I mean, it was a tough night, wasn't it? It was a tough night. I have to say, I wasn't overly surprised. I didn't feel good going into that game about Arsenal's chances. Yeah. I just kind of thought something like that was coming. And they were coming up against a Newcastle side who are playing very, very well, who are obviously very confident, who have got an absolute, clinical marksman in their side who's playing out of his skin at the moment. I didn't feel great going into that game. And unfortunately my fears were realised. It was a tough night, wasn't it?
Let's be clear for our viewers. When you say you didn't feel great, not only did you not feel great, you were wandering around the press box at the Emirates pre-match like, Eeyore, going over to everyone saying, "Oh, I've got bad," or like C3PO, "I've got a bad feeling about this."
Yeah, I was not overly optimistic. I was not overly optimistic when in our conversations pre-match to you and some other
just trying to talk about the traitors.
I know, I have to admit, I was not overly optimistic, but my fears were realised, weren't they? It was kind of, to be fair, actually, the game actually panned out very differently to what I was expecting. I didn't expect Arsenal to end it with 3.5 XG or just under and miss a load of chances. I thought it was going to be very much kind of like the games we've seen at St James's Park against Newcastle of late, but it didn't pan out like that. Arsenal did create a lot of chances. They did have a lot of chances. They didn't take any of them, unfortunately, and they were picked off by Newcastle at the other end. I don't think they covered themselves in glory defensively either for either of those two goals. But the sort of fallout from it as well has not, it's as I said at the start, it sort of paints a picture of the frustration that a lot of people are feeling about us. I mean, look, it was the first defeat in 13, 14 games. So, they've been on a decent unbeaten run. But despite that, and despite the points they have picked up of late, there's still been this air of, how do you paint it? Again, I keep going back to the word frustration at how Arsenal are playing, at how the results have been achieved, and the sort of entertainment factor of games has all have been, that air has just been hanging around for the last sort of month or so, hasn't it? And I think it's all kind of spilled out and come to a head since Tuesday.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, I know even since we've spoken, the defeats haven't been there, but there's been some frustrating results for Arsenal and even some performances in wins where the fans feel like they're not happy with their lot. And I think Brighton is the only game of late where you can really say Arsenal were poor. I think people just don't like the idea that maybe what's happening to Arsenal this season, a lot of it is largely beyond Mikel Arteta's control and the fans' control and all of that. If Bukayo Saka was on the pitch on Tuesday, Arsenal would have created more chances and they would have scored at least one, I believe, because he's their best player. And he's going to have been missing for 2 or 3 months by the time we see him again. There's been no Ødegaard. And I think there's just been some games where the ball, you do everything right and the ball doesn't go in the net.
Don't mention the ball. Don't mention the ball.
Don't mention the ball. Oh, Lord, don't mention the ball. But I think it's just been a season where Arsenal have been really unlucky with injuries, with red cards, and all their bad finishing seems to like clump into some games. Like Martinelli does everything right, perfect shot, except it hits the post. You know, great trajectory, great movement, does the keeper with the eyes, gets everything right, and it hits the post. And that's Arsenal's season in a microcosm. And I think that's more infuriating for fans when they think that something's opened up because City are on the slide and Liverpool are even struggling and they can't make up the gap. But I don't really feel like we'll talk about one of the things they could have done and could do. But I don't think there's a huge amount that really here is like, you would say, this is what Arsenal, Arteta, Edu has got wrong. I think it's more just like, this is what happens in a low scoring sport.
Yeah, I saw your piece afterwards, wasn't it? It was like, you can talk about a lot of factors, but it all boils down to Arsenal being unlucky this season. And I'm sure the reaction to that was pretty
Mixed.
Yeah, wasn't the word I was looking for. But yeah, I could imagine some of the reaction to that. But I do think there is definitely an argument for that this season has felt kind of cursed from the start for Arsenal. And look, I'm not absolving Arteta, coaching staff, Edu before he went, the board of any blame. And, you know, I feel they definitely could have done more in the summer to leave themselves in a better position for the season ahead. But I do also feel that it does just have that sense of a season where pretty much everything that could go wrong for Arsenal is going wrong for Arsenal. And I can't shake that feeling, even during games and stuff, that it just feels like that. And again, Tuesday night, look, it was Arsenal's fault. Basically, you can't look at that game and think it was anyone else's fault that they lost the game. It was theirs. They missed some absolute sitters. They defended poorly for Newcastle's goals. And so you can't blame anyone but yourselves for that. But you do need to, you know, and that thing of you need to make your own luck, which I agree with. But there is still a sense of on another day, you win that game. You know, you play that match 9 times out of 10 again, and it goes the same way in terms of chances being created and all of that. Arsenal win that game 9 times out of 10. They just do. But this season, it's not happening for them. And I think it must be noted as well that, look, Arsenal are second in the Premier League still. They are in the Champions League in a very good position in there. They're still in the semi-final. Yes, they've got a mountain to climb, but they are still in the semi-final of the League Cup. We don't know how they're going to do in the FA Cup yet. So it's not a disaster. We're not talking about a relegation threatened season here. We're not talking about a Manchester United season or a Tottenham season.
Not even talking about a Manchester City season. Yeah. And I think it's important to say, like, when the breaks haven't gone against Arsenal, they're still at a stage where the fans can be furious that they're not in the title race.
Yeah,
which
they're still finding ways to get through games and win games and stuff like that, aren't they? And I think that is a measure of the team and the players that they have. They are still managing to do that. But there is just, I think, that frustration, like you mentioned, Man City there, the fact that this is the season where City have fallen off finally. And everyone feels like it should be Arsenal to take advantage of that because of how last 2 seasons have gone. But the fact that it's looking like it's not going to be Arsenal who's going to take advantage of that just adds to the frustration around the place of, we've missed our chance and we haven't done enough. And so let's talk about that. We haven't done enough, shall we? Because look, I put out a thing for questions ahead of this show, and these are just 3 that I selected, but lots of people have been talking about that. We are obviously in January transfer window now, so it's the perfect time to talk about all of this. So we've got like Callum at the top there, who says, good to have you back, by the way. He said he missed you in my 2024 awards. Yeah, I rattled through those very, very quickly, and I definitely should have had you involved in that. But there's no way I could have done, the way I was feeling, could have done a 40-minute show that morning. As for the January and the season, I do struggle to see us doing anything significant in terms of business. I don't want to see the players out there who just that we want being available, and I don't want to play for 20, 30 million as a stopgap. That's just Raheem Sterling on permanent deal, more or less. So my question for you both, if you could sign a wide attacker forward this summer, who would it be? Being realistic about the club they are at, how willing they'd be. I didn't actually notice this was about the summer. I thought it was about January. But then JK there says, question for you both. What do you think we can or should add in this window? Who would you like us to sign? Carlo Guna says, hi, Charles and Benge. Who would be your ideal but realistic January signing out of all the players who've been linked with? Also mentions Day of the Jackal, which, by the way, I have got 3 episodes to go on. And I actually watched an episode on the way to Arsenal on Tuesday night and an episode on the way back from Arsenal on Tuesday night. It is fantastic. So you're right, Carlo Guna.
Okay.
Have
you watched Black Doves?
Yes, we finished Black Doves because I was watching that with Michelle, my wife.
Just started that. Very good.
We went through that very quickly and we enjoyed it. But Michelle's decided she didn't want to watch Day of the Jackal, so I'm having to sort of pick and choose my moments to watch that. So I'm not able to sort of sit down and binge it each night because she doesn't want to watch it, which she should have done. She's made a big mistake because it is absolutely brilliant. So yeah, get on it. As Carlo said, if you haven't watched it, get on it. It's a fantastic show. It's one of those ones that every episode finishes, you just want to watch the next one to see what he does and how he gets away with it. But anyway, enough about Day of the Jackal. So lots of people here asking about the window and what we can do. And there's loads of talk about it. I did a show this morning about Nico Williams and those rumours doing the rounds again. And all the talk since Tuesday night, isn't it, has been about Arsenal's lack of a clinical finisher and, you know, the sort of narrative of Alexander Isak doing what he did at the other end and everything is just, you know, is impossible to ignore. It's very clear to me that Arsenal need to do something in attack this month. That if they want to take advantage of the position they're in various competitions this season, they need to do something. I cannot see a way, with Saka potentially being out for the next 3 months, we don't know. I cannot see a way of Arsenal getting over the line in any of the competitions they're in unless they do something this month. I hope I'm wrong, but I can't see it. So I think they need to do everything they can this month to get someone in to help with that. I would suggest you would probably agree. Do you?
100%. Yeah. Wholeheartedly.
So let's sit down now and sort of go through some of the options. I sent you a message earlier telling you we're going to do this and to sort of come up with some names. They've got to be realistic because I'm not saying sitting in now and saying like Arsenal go and sign Alexander Isak this month because it's just not going to happen. A, they're not going to put that money down. B, Newcastle aren't going to sell even if they did. So that's not going to happen. So it has to be realistic. So for this month, this is quite interesting because I've looked at some of the sort of names that I've plucked out, the players I've plucked out, and the ones that you sent me. And I think there's quite an interesting theme going on with them that we need to explore as well. So
I just want to see which slide you're loading up first.
Well, I'm gonna load up. Actually, let me load up this slide first because he is, as the time of recording, is all over football news at the moment.
Good. And
because if you haven't seen this, and by the time you're watching this or listening to this, you probably will have done because it's all, as I said, it's all over. You know, Fabrizio's talking about it, Gianluca Di Marzio's talking about it, everyone's talking about it. That Kvaratskhelia, it seems like he's on his way out. Or Napoli are open to doing business this month, and all the talk is PSG are sort of in discussions to find a deal that could involve a couple of players and stuff like that. It looks like around sort of €80 million mark to get him, and Napoli are willing to do business because he's not going to sign a new contract, and I think he's got 18 months left on his deal.
Yeah. It's pittance the deal as well because they signed him from Georgia.
So what's that? €8 million? What's that? About £70 million, something like that.
Yes, he's on about 40 grand a week.
22, I think.
23 or 4. No.
So realistic.
23 years. Of course, he's realistic. If Napoli are looking to do business, and that's a big price tag, but it's the sort of price tag that if you're Arsenal,
is it a big price tag? Now,
big, but not ginormous. Not the sort that would actually preclude you from doing let's say a Benjamin Sesko in this coming summer, or a Gyökeres, or even sort of hoarding some money for when. And I'll come on to the sort of hoarding money for when Isak has got 2 years left on his contract, let's say. But I don't think you will find many players in world football this good available for that price. I watch, obviously, because CBS have the rights, I always keep an eye on Kvaratskhelia, and I know this season has been a bit difficult with injuries and working under Conte, but he's still sensational. And if you get anything like the player that Napoli have now, let alone the guy that helped win Napoli the Serie A title a few years back, that guy is one of the hardest things that there is on the market to find right now, which is the clear, indisputable upgrade on Gabriel Martinelli. I think he would be perfect for the sort of teams Arsenal come up against, you know, crafting his way down through a low block. Ease some of the reliance on Martin Ødegaard. He gets shots, he gets goals, he gets assists. I can totally understand if Kvaratskhelia decides he wants to move to Paris and PSG and be the star there. But I think it would be remiss of Arsenal to not get themselves in this conversation. I mean, it looks like one that's developing quickly. So, Jason Ato, get your phone on. I've got Aurelio De Laurentiis' number if you need it. Get yourself in the conversation for this guy. and he could. I mean, it could go wrong, but he could be the player to change Arsenal's trajectory this season. I really believe that. You're talking Aubameyang, like getting Aubameyang out of Dortmund. If that opportunity presents itself in mid-season, just go for it. Work out everything else after.
And the thing is with this, if they don't enter the conversation for this, which look, we've seen no suggestions or signals that they are going to enter the suggestion for this, but the sort of conversation for this. But if they don't, the argument of there was no one really available in January just doesn't stack up, does it? Because clearly here we've got a really super talented young winger who would definitely, you would say, improve Arsenal, who is available, who is not massively expensive. You know, so why wouldn't you join the conversation unless it's very, very clear? And you'd imagine they've the feelers have been put out and stuff like that. Unless it's been made very, very clear that it's PSG or no one. You know, he's got his heart set on PSG and he doesn't want to talk to anyone else. You know, that's the only sort of excuse there is, I think, for not entering the conversation with him, because he's a player in an area where Arsenal need to sign someone, have tried to sign people in the past for more money. You know, they were willing to put more money down on Mudryk than he would cost by the sounds of it. So yeah, I agree. I think the fact that this seems like this is a market opportunity to be had now, you know, it just feels to me like something that Arsenal should be at least trying to do. We'll wait and see if it does. But as you said, it seems to be moving pretty quickly, and at the moment, it only seems to be PSG who are sort of leading the conversations with Napoli about it. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's one that has literally popped up in sort of an hour or so before we started to record this, and it'll be very interesting to see how quickly it develops. But yeah, I agree with you. You know, it was one of the joys of the Euros was watching him play, and the excitement, that ability of just running at his man, and the pace. It was just really, really exciting. And yeah, I mean, he immediately improves. The only thing is, I suppose, does he help with the lack of Bukayo Saka between now and the end of the season? That's the only thing I can think of. Obviously, he's the left-sided player, but then I suppose if you've got an absolute gunman down the left-hand side, I suppose yes, you still might be missing Saka, but maybe you've got someone who's contributing more on the left-hand side to sort of take the burden off the fact Saka's not there. I don't know, but that's the only thing I can think of in terms of needs now. But yeah, it just feels to me like one that Arsenal absolutely should be in the mix for, or certainly at the very least asking quite strong questions about his availability.
Yeah, there might not be another player this good come on the market for years. That's the thing. And you know, if we go back to when Arsenal signed Aubameyang, in my head I can't quite remember sort of what the striker market was exactly like then, off the top of my head. But I don't think that 28-year-old Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was the obvious first choice that you just have to go and get. And I mean, obviously, he wasn't even Arsenal's first choice a few months earlier, was he? And sometimes the market just dictates what you can do. And it felt like in the summer, Arsenal weren't really willing to push or to gamble because they felt like time was on their side. And I do understand that then, but time's not going to keep being on your side. And you know, in the time it might take for a Rodrigo, who you might play on the left, or Vinicius, or whoever like you think is much better than Kvaratskhelia to become available, how do you know what's going to happen with Saliba and Saka? Sometimes these opportunities are just thrown to you at a moment's notice, and you got to go for them. You've got to take a swing, because the upside of that guy on the left, Saka on the right, Erdegaard, Calafiori, all those, like that whole setup, I think if it really worked, it could completely change Arsenal's ceiling and turn them into the best team in Europe. And you might not then even need to go and wait and get Isak or Sesko or whoever. So sometimes this is just the market kind of gives you this way of massively upgrading your team, and you have to take it even if you weren't planning it.
Yeah. Okay, right. Next person. This is one of the names that you sent over to me that you would sort of as a realistic target, and it's Endrick at Real Madrid. Now, Endrick's quite an interesting one in this slide, so we're going to talk about this now. So I've pulled together a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slides of suggestions. I mean, you made a couple I've added a couple on there, and I think Endrick is the only what you'd probably describe as a centre forward on there. The rest of them are all wingers. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But first of all, why Endrick? Why is he someone that you think is a realistic possible option this month?
Yeah, I mean, only on loan. He's played 90 minutes in La Liga, 80 in the Champions League. So he needs football. It's a bit of a gamble that an 18-year-old is ready to make a really big impact on the Premier League when he's not being trusted by Real Madrid to do the same thing. But, we've seen Nathan Ranieri show it can be done, and we saw the guys at Tottenham last night show that you can do something. And he's a forward that's available, that is playing at a high level, like you kind of hinted at there. I'm not seeing many other options in that regard. So we know that Real Madrid loanies can work out quite well. And yeah, I view this as a loan, but I'm also well aware of what the upside is with someone like Martin Ødegaard. If you can get this guy through the door and he likes life in London for the long term, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, he's an exciting talent. My only issue is that, yeah, like you said, 18-year-old kid coming in to try and on loan to try and be the difference maker in the second half of the season might be a bit of a stretch. But clearly talented, and even at international level when he's been asked to sort of step up, he's shown he can. I suppose one player who, when I talk about, I suppose you could put Moani in as a striker, as a forward, likes to sort of play sort of. Obviously, he started out wide, and he sort of drifted into central areas and stuff like that. But I look at him as a market opportunity, a player this month who could come in and make a difference over the second half of the season. Yes, it's not been great for him at PSG, but clearly a talented player there. He's still done it kind of internationally for France, even when he's been struggling for PSG of late. Can score goals, no doubt about it. Can play in a couple of positions as well. And the big thing, potentially available this month. I think, well, no, not even potentially, is available this month. He is someone who I look at on the market in a pretty difficult market to navigate when you're actually looking for a forward, I suppose, as someone who is there and available who could make a difference. So I think he's not been in sort of mentioned really in any sort of conversation. It seems like all the talk has been about Spurs, Manchester United recently, or possibly I think Juventus are certainly pushing to sign him, AC Milan, teams on that, but not Arsenal. So again, in this sort of atmosphere of there's not really much available, it doesn't really stack up because there are options there. I'm not saying Moani is the guy who's going to come in and could change Arsenal, but he is certainly someone who you could take a chance on for 6 months until the end of the season, who could come in and make a difference. He's got the quality to do that, and he has shown that before.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got a slide of him. I kind of picked his PSG teammate Gonzalo Ramos because I thought more pure number 9, but may not become available if Kolomuani is. And the question there would be, could Arsenal get him on loan if other clubs are prepared to do the deal permanently? I'm really intrigued by Kolomuani, but I'm really skeptical of buying players from PSG. I just think there's a sort of slightly different dominance that PSG have over Liga and compared to, even though Arsenal dominate every game they play, they're playing against really good teams, which PSG are doing quite infrequently. And I feel like, I don't know why, I just feel like Gonzalo Ramos as a more pure centre forward suits that better. But look, I think Arsenal are, it's almost the same thing I thought when I put Endrick's name down. Arsenal have got themselves in a stage where it is a bit like beggars can't be choosers. You're going to take on Man United in the FA Cup with probably 4 forwards. Have I forgotten anyone? And one of them, Raheem Sterling, you won't play, even when your team can't score goals. If Kolomuani is the best forward on the market that you can get, then I think trying to get him on loan is a good idea. And if PSG said we want 40 million for him, you're probably going to end up needing more than one forward long term. So he's someone that can play right and central. He'd get his game time. I don't hate it. I preferred Ramos, but I don't hate it.
I don't know about Ramos. I don't know. He's not one that's ever sort of really sort of floated my boat when I see him.
He's less available as well. It would probably require PSG to not lose Kolomuani.
So Nico Williams. I know you haven't been overly impressed with what he's done this season, and I get that. But I do think players who have had a really strong and long run in the Euros in the summer need to be given a little bit of leeway this season. Across Europe, a lot of them are struggling to sort of maintain the form that they'd shown before that. But again, sort of going back to the argument on no one's available, it would be a very difficult deal to do this month, but he does have a release clause that makes him potentially gettable if you decide to really go for it and you say to him, okay, these are your wages, this is what you wanted, we're going to give you that, we're going to pay the release clause, we're going to get you. And so we know that Mikel Arteta likes Nico Williams. That is not a secret. If Williams had shown any sort of inkling of leaving in the summer, I think Arsenal would have been right at the forefront of that conversation. And if they don't do anything in January and he decides he is going to go at the end of the season, I would imagine Arsenal will at least try and get something done for him in the summer as well. So when we're looking at realistic options who could come in and improve the team, I think it's impossible not to have Williams in that conversation just because of that release clause, even though it would be difficult.
I just don't get it. I know he was brilliant at the Euros. Lots of players are lots of players, and I don't think Mikel Arteta is just going off the Euros here, but lots of players have great tournaments that aren't all that. I mean, you see it every Euros, don't you? And then some fool buys them, and sometimes they get an Andrei Arshavin, and sometimes they don't. I think what you get there is a winger that does some good ball progression and is useful at getting the ball in dangerous positions and creates chances and does get assists. I don't know if that's what Arsenal need from a left winger. I think Arsenal they're always going to be a team that plays predominantly on the right-hand side. I think their left winger, and I know that Martinelli is a touchline hugging left winger, but I do really feel like the guy on the left needs to have at least some sort of back post nous to him, which Martinelli has. I don't think Nico Williams is so good to justify Mikel Arteta's obsession about him. I know that Mikel Arteta knows more about football than me, but if he ever feels like talking about transfers, I'd love him to explain to me what it is he's seeing for Arsenal that I'm not about this player. And I would be fairly skeptical if they signed him on over 200,000 a week as well.
Yeah, it's big money for a very young player. You'd be putting a very young player in on money well in excess of what some senior players at Arsenal already earning, which might upset the apple cart a little bit. So I don't think it's 1 goal and 2 assists this season for him in the league. I mean, it's not great. If we were bemoaning Martinelli's output, then but then you can point to Alexander Isak, and when Arsenal were being linked with him when he was at Sociedad, everyone was looking at his goal scoring record for them and saying, "Oh, that's not good enough." There was no real general excitement about those links. Obviously, now everyone talks about them and says we should have got him then. But at the time when those links were going around, and I remember it really well with it was a classic deadline day thing, wasn't it? It was spotted. His car was spotted coming out of the Emirates or something like that, wasn't it? With his number plate or something like that. People were tracking.
He went shopping at Selfridges on a weekend.
But at the time, there was not mass excitement about the possibility of signing Isak. There was lots of talk about his injury record and the fact he wasn't prolific enough and all that sort of stuff. Now, obviously, everyone's raving about him, and I am. I'd love Alexander Isak, but so when you talk about maybe the lack of output from Williams this season, I say it's tough not to sort of compare it to maybe what Isak was doing at Sociedad as well.
The goals is his whole career. He doesn't score goals. It's a goal every 10 and a half hours in La Liga.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah. So you're very much in the Kvaratskhelia camp rather than Nico Williams camp when it comes to improving Arsenal's left-hand side. All right, let's rattle through a few other sort of realistic ones. This is one you mentioned over Borussia Dortmund. Explain why.
Now, this is a guy on form. Jamie Gittins is doing so well for Dortmund. Left-footed and right-footed from the looks of it. Could be the sort of winger that Arteta likes playing on the left, could cover on the right as well. I think this is more one where you'd sign him permanently, I would say, but it would be dependent on the price tag, because I think you'd be viewing him as immediate competition for Martinelli, but not necessarily the guy that you think is going to steal his place right away. It's a swing at talent. But I mean, clearly talent that's delivering quite frequently. My two hot takes on England is I think Jamie Gittins and Archie Gray will be in the squad for the 2026 World Cup. I think actually both might be in Tuchel's first squad. I think Archie Gray will start at the World Cup. I don't think Gittins will. I just wanted to put that out there, that Archie Gray thing.
Where's he gonna, what position is he going to play?
I think Gray, Rice, Bellingham is your midfield three.
Is it? Okay. Need Tottenham to start playing in there first.
I think he will, yeah. But yeah, I mean, Gittins is 5 goals, 3 assists in 900-ish Bundesliga minutes. Done really well in the Champions League as well.
Champions League, isn't he?
Yeah. So I feel like he would probably be your first choice backup for Martinelli and Saka, but I think that would work quite well.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like your oh God, have I forgotten his name at Chelsea? The right winger.
Neto?
No, the guy they
Madueke.
Madueke, yeah, it's kind of like your Arsenal's version of Madueke, I suppose.
I thought about sending you his name.
Right, a couple others. I've got Leroy Sané in the mix again. When you're sort of looking at market opportunities, 6 months left of his contract, I think, at Bayern Munich. I don't think he started that many games this season under Kompany. Maybe there's an option. It would be an expensive one, wages wise. Of course, Bakayoko at PSV is another one I was thinking of. Who, where he just passed the eye test when I watched him against Arsenal. Mm-hmm. He just passed the eye test. I was like, wow, this kid's good. He's exciting. Yeah. That's the sort of player that Arsenal could do with. So he's another one. I think he's only got about a year left on his contract there as well. I don't think it might be 18 months or something like that, but I don't think he's got massive length of contract left there. So he's another one I was thinking of who, when I'm looking at potential realistic signings for this window, I don't think you could definitely say PSV wouldn't sell if Arsenal went knocking for him this window, as long as, I've said it on a few shows that I just feel Arsenal in that position where even if you have to overpay this month, I think you're in a position where you need to react because of the lack of Saka and because of where you are in the competitions and because of the struggles you are having in front of goal and in attack. I feel like you need to react. And even if it means overpaying by £10 million to maybe fast track something you'd ideally like to do in the summer, that could potentially be worth it for what that person could do over the next 6 months of this season. And so that's when I'm talking about maybe being realistic about someone like Bakayoko. If you go in and whack 10 million more than maybe you would like to on the table for PSV.
Yeah, like about 45 million, yeah.
That could be the difference of tempting them into doing business. So there's others as well, sort of Lookman, I suppose, at Atalanta, having a fantastic season as well. Those type of players. So, I mean, we've just gone through a few there. It is interesting, though, that the sort of majority are wingers, when in this sort of the reaction to Newcastle, all the talk was about the striker. But is it just... And I think, I'm going to answer my own question here, I suppose. It's, or I know the answer to my own question. It's just much harder to get those strikers in January than it is in the summer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It feels like they are a limited breed and hard to just not that easy to get out of clubs. I mean, I sort of hinted at this before. I do worry that if you sort of hold this candle for Isak and you wait and you wait and you wait, you're really sort of running the risk of just letting everything else slip by you. And I do think they just need to get a striker in the summer, especially with Jesus would then have a year left on his contract. Like, you can carry that cost for a year of just having Jesus sat around as your third choice striker. And I think Arsenal need to be a bit more willing to carry some costs for a little while. I don't know if you saw Swiss Rambles. They did a big PSR position for every Premier League club, and you look at it and they've got about 160 million worth of potential losses they could make. Now, they shouldn't just make a loss for the sake of it. But like, when you think about amortizing a big money fee over a 5-year contract, there is real room there to improve the squad significantly. So
I think that's a big thing.
Go and do it.
That it is a big thing, that it just does not appear like PSR really is an issue for Arsenal at the moment. They have scope to go out and do something potentially pretty big, either this month or in the summer. The PSR isn't really an issue, and that is quite a big thing.
I could always find some sort of hotel to sell. Can they sell the museum to themselves?
Maybe.
Or
Chelsea
probably
do
they? Yeah, exactly. Just do what Chelsea do if you get in trouble.
Yeah. So there's definitely options out there, and that's why I just think they will be really hurting themselves if they don't explore it. I think it's just patently obvious for everyone. I thought it was interesting. Arteta's comment in the presser afterwards, when he was talking about Isak, and he said, when you have the real quality up front, they can make the difference. It was something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What did you make of that comment and how he said it? Like, a lot of people perceive that as a bit of a dig at maybe the owners or Edu or whatever about, was he a bit annoyed that he hasn't been given the tools that he wanted up front? Did you see it that way at all?
I think you do have to be careful, because it's a question that sort of comes in the middle of a press conference. And, we were joking about the ball earlier. I think there has been this sort of, in 2024, 2025, in the last few years, there's every little word that a manager says is sort of passed for every possible meaning it could have. And I know that Arteta is very careful with how he speaks, and really, when you ask him a question, he will always take a beat to think. So I wouldn't rule out that there's a hint there, but sometimes I just think he's saying a really nice thing about Alexander Isak that's obviously true. I'm balancing that with the fact I know that Arteta's been hinting for years about not being entirely happy with what he has in that penalty area. So I think it's a valid reading, because he always hints at that.
Yeah,
but
I mean, he's not stupid, is he? He's not. There's no way that Arteta can sit there and be happy with what he's got in terms of his striker options. I mean, his striker basically is a player he signed not to be a striker, but he's using him as a striker, which kind of says a lot about his other options that he's got there. And he's done well. Kai Havertz, obviously, horrendously awful header aside against Newcastle on Tuesday night.
I put a message in Slack to my editor 10 minutes earlier saying, if I write a piece on Arsenal's luck, the ball's going to bounce in off some appendage of Kai Havertz. And it looked like, from the angle we have in the press box, I was like, oh my God, I actually made it happen.
I thought it had gone in when the angle, like you said, where the way I was sitting, it looked like it's found its way into the far corner. But that was such an awful attempt. It was technically, it was just so bad. But the fact you are playing Havertz as your number 9 when you didn't sign him as a number 9, it kind of paints your own picture. There's no way Mikel can be happy with what he's got. And I do wonder how he felt over the failure to get Sesko in the summer. Whether Sesko would have made much of a difference, who knows? But I do wonder how he's felt about Arsenal's failure to get that deal done and over the line. But yeah, so that's been a good topic of conversation. I think realistic. But who are we gonna sort? So if you could sign one player realistically this month out of all those ones we've talked about, who would it be and why?
Oh, Kvara.
Really?
He's world class. He's probably going to be the only world class player on the market this month. Go get him.
I think I would have to agree, just because I think it's also very, very realistic, because he's there. He's there. He is on the market. You can go and sign him this month, and it is not. He's young. He fits the profile of everything Arsenal want in players. He's in a position that they need, and they've tried to sign players for him in the past, and he's not massively expensive. He's entirely gettable. Yeah, I agree. I just think it's the ultimate January market opportunity, and I don't think they really have much of an excuse if they don't try. But aside from whether it's been made very, very clear to them and everyone else that he only wants to sign for PSG, which obviously I don't know if that's the case, but I don't see why that would be the case either.
Yeah, can I say, Khvicha, if you're watching, Paris is rubbish. Like, go live in St Albans, mate. It's so much nicer.
Well, it seems as well Napoli are open to player swap deals. I think Skriniar's been linked as a possible stopgap. But Arsenal got Jakob Kivior, who Napoli have wanted in the past, and Kivior's there. If you could potentially add Kivior into the mix as well, and then not have to spend as much money cash wise, it just feels like it's entirely doable.
They've wanted almost every player Arsenal have signed for the last decade, haven't they? I would sort of take an iPad with your squad page and sort of go, remember when you loved Kieran Tierney?
Yeah. We'll see how it all progresses, but it certainly seems like at the moment PSG are the only real team being mentioned on it. But yeah, that was
one last thing. It also ruins things for Antonio Conte. What more could you want?
There you go. There you go. So just quickly going back to these questions. There you go, Callum, JK, Carlo, and everyone else who asked those sort of questions. That was our chat on all of those. Just scrolling through, we've got a few other questions, sort of slightly different topics to go before we wrap this one up. Vet Power has asked, obviously hoping we can do something in January, but if we can't, is going back to the Saliba, Gabriel, Rice triangle not our best way of keeping clean sheets? Defend the lives out of teams, give the fullbacks more scope to attack. Nick one, concede nothing. For all the criticism Arteta gets for his style of play, is fundamentally quite sustainable and pragmatic. Just needs a bit of luck.
I definitely thought Newcastle were the first team to beat the whole. The joy of Rice as an 8 is you usually get him as a 6 as well, don't you, in defence? But Newcastle was so quick in the way they passed and the pace of their players that it quite often felt like Rice just couldn't get back in time. So I think it would work. I think you should play him as a 6 against Newcastle, but I think for a lot of other teams you should be okay if Partey plays well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought Newcastle, I thought Isak just showed his quality. He really unsettled Saliba and Gabriel, like sort of a forward I haven't really seen done since. I remember Ivan Toney a couple of years ago at the Emirates really did cause Saliba in particular an awful lot of problems. But they just hit that channel a lot, didn't they? It was just down that right side channel for Isak to make those runs. And again, it was just that quick, how quickly they did it. And it's something Arsenal need to look at because a couple of times Arsenal got a bit of joy in that first half. Was when they just went long and direct. It was that one chance. I can't remember who played the ball over, but Martinelli got down the left. And if he'd got his head up and crossed the ball, Trossard was in a good position at the back post. And that was a similar sort of ball to what we saw Newcastle do. And we've seen it with, remember Saka's goal against Liverpool when Ben White pinged that lovely ball down the right-hand side and Saka got into it, chopped inside Robertson and put it in. That is, when we talk about Arsenal and their slow style of play and how you allow teams to sort of set themselves, there is that option of just going long like that. And if you do it right, it causes teams problems because they can't be set. And I think Newcastle took, that was a big advantage for Newcastle when they were just hitting Isak and he was getting on the channel and Saliba and Arsenal weren't set. The centre-backs were out of positions and it caused them problems and it unsettled them. And I definitely think Arsenal should look at that a little bit more because they did get a little bit joy from it. One from Sea Lord says, I know after a lost bad period is never a good time to take the temperature of fans' views, but I've been really surprised how many Arsenal fans whose views I respect have been talking about us playing boring football. Never enjoy a loss, but feel like I'm the only fan who enjoys watching us these days. I know we could play quicker and create more, but with the injuries and loss of form in some attacking players, it's not surprising we haven't. And it's really hard to play well against a low block. There have been plenty of games this season I've enjoyed, but wanted to hear your thoughts on it and what you think it's down to. Yeah, this all goes back to what we spoke about first at the start, the sort of air of frustration around Arsenal at the moment. I think a lot of it sort of boils down to not just results, but performances and style of play. It's always a lot of discussion about it, isn't it? And Sea Lord says here he certainly seems to be one of the few that's enjoying watching Arsenal. I mean, what do you make of the whole sort of the boring tag? We heard it. Brighton fans were singing "Boring, Boring Arsenal" the other day when I was there. And who was the other team? Ipswich, which was quite funny considering they played literally with 10 men defence the entire team and entire night. And the Ipswich fans were singing it at the end as well. But Arsenal fans have, it's been a big topic of conversation. Style of play. Is it exciting? Is it entertaining? A lot of people say no. And that's contributed to maybe thousands of fans leaving with 10 minutes to go against Newcastle, which was a weird sight that we haven't really seen, since the end of the Emery era. So what did you make of that? And what do you make of Arsenal in their style of play at the moment?
Yeah, I promise you that there were games like this under Arsene Wenger, a lot of them. You've just forgotten them. And you will forget games like Ipswich that were dreadfully boring. You will forget them in a heartbeat. But Arsene Wenger's team, when they used to win 1-0, that's what it looked like. That's what it looks like when you forget the games that Man City play like this all the time, and there are dozens of them. So there's that. I think then in terms of the other side of the fan frustration, I mean, I think some of this really just boils down to there's so much football. I think people feel a little bit overwhelmed and a bit like annoyed and tired. I mean, you'll know even better than me, but from some of the sort of Arsenal season ticket holders and fans I was talking to, there was so little appetite for a big cup semi-final on a Tuesday night, because people were like, well, a lot of them, some of them would have been like, I just made the trip down to Brighton and it got rained on and drove back through what you were telling me sounded like pretty terrifying horror movie conditions. And then I've got United on Sunday and it's the derby after that. And then it's Villa, and I'm looking at my bank balance and I can't be asked anymore. And I'm not staying out till, 10:45, and then you don't get home until midnight. When it was obvious the game's going, I get that people want to go home 10 minutes early. I think that's the in-stadium stuff. I think the stuff on social media is just increasingly bad faith morons. So I don't worry too much about that. But I think with the fans, I think when fans are finding it all a bit of a slog, the sheer weight of fixtures, I think that's when you need to look at the calendar. But yeah, you'll know better than me on the fan front. Were you hearing the same for people where you were sat?
Yeah, but I do think that football certainly has to come into it. It's not been much fun watching Arsenal.
Yeah.
They're not playing great football. There's no, you can't dress it up. It's not the best football. I think there's reasons for that. I think of the injuries, the loss of their best players, it's an absolute contributing factor to it. But they definitely, it's pretty slow and laborious at times. And so I think that comes into it. But I also think game state as well. I think there's been so many games this season. And it's 13 out of 30 games Arsenal have scored one or none. So nearly half of the games in all competitions. And when you're constantly saying almost half your games, you've constantly sort of on edge a little bit, because you're either not winning, or if you are winning, you're only winning by one. You've probably missed a few chances. You don't get as much enjoyment out of that game, because you'll never be able to sort of relax and just enjoy it, because the game's done and dusted it and won. So I think you're always kind of on edge and nervy, and I think that sort of plays into how you're viewing games as well. Because ultimately, you win a game 2 or 3-0. If Arsenal say they play the exact way they did against Newcastle on Tuesday night, but they win the game 2 or 3-0. Say Timber scores that header early on, Martinelli sticks the next one away. It's 2-0 at half time. Newcastle don't get the break that they did for their goals, and then Havertz scores his header and Arsenal win that 3-0, but playing the exact same way.
Yeah.
No one's going home from that game disappointed and unhappy at how Arsenal played. Everyone's going home thinking, well, we've got one foot in the final. We've just beaten Newcastle 3-0. So I think results obviously play a huge part in it as well. And ultimately this season, Arsenal haven't been getting those results consistently enough for people to really be able to sort of sit back and enjoy what's going on. So I think there are mitigating circumstances to it, but I definitely think there is an argument that it is a bit of a grind watching Arsenal at times. I will sit there in the press box or in the stands if I'm in the stand, and there's been a lot of times this season when you're just like, oh, come on, move the ball a bit faster, can you? Rather than the centre backs knocking it to each other 5 times in a row, can you not sort of get it up a bit for it? I found myself doing that a lot more often, certainly under Mikel Arteta this season, than I have in any season that I've since the sort of upturning trajectory has started. Definitely. Right, I think there's one more before we can wrap this one up. Daniel says, Happy New Year to you both. We seem to have a doom and gloom run every season since Arteta took charge, where it seems like we will never win a game again. Post-FA Cup win, 3 defeats in a row, 21-22. While going for top 4 title collapse 2022-23 and 23-24 Christmas. Obviously, we bounce back and forget it ever happened. Why do you think this is, and what can we do to prevent it? Our squad seems to have a great mentality and clearly very talented. Which it got me thinking when I was reading it. I mean, there have been in pretty much every season so far. There have been these little runs, wasn't there? There was last season around this time of year when you had the West. You lost at Villa at the start, towards the start of December. Then it was a draw at Liverpool, wasn't it? Then there was a defeat at home to West Ham, the loss at Fulham, the FA Cup exit to Liverpool, and it just went on that sort of run. I mean, I don't know about this season. Yeah, I mean, this is Arsenal's first defeat, obviously, in 14 games or 13 games, whatever it was. Hopefully, it's not going to turn into one of these. They can bounce back, beat United at the weekend. But there has been the collapses for the top 4 race, obviously. But I was just thinking, is this not just kind of the norm for most teams? Have we just, is it just because Arsenal now win so many games in the last sort of 3 seasons that when they do go on a patch of maybe 3 games without a win, that it just feels so much more painful because of what they're competing for and what they've done previously in terms of how many wins they get? And when they don't win, it just seems more apparent.
Yeah, I think that is how almost every team drop their points. They tend to, especially the best teams, they tend to drop them in bunches. I mean, I've just fired up City last season. I'm looking at it now. They have those two. Their two defeats two of their 3 defeats in the entire season come back to back. Then they have a run of 5 games where they pick up 3 points. 4 games where they pick up 3 points, and then 6 games where they win only 1. It's just how it goes, because those are the moments. I'm certain if I went back and looked at that, that would be a moment where Haaland was injured or De Bruyne was out. Yeah, and this season, of course, with Rodri. I mean, it was the 2 games they lost, I think, were the 2 where Rodri was suspended. That's what happens. If anyone ever wants to if any other fan ever wants to argue that Bukayo Saka isn't one of the 20 best footballers in the world, just show him how hard Arsenal are finding life without him. Like, that's just what happens when your best players aren't around. Or, I mean, I guess maybe last year it was a case of they lost a bit. The best players lost a bit of form. But yeah, I mean, the title collapse in 22-23 was what happens when William Saliba's not around.
Yeah.
And the difficulties this season have been what happens when Martin Odegaard and Bukayo Saka's not around. So that's why I keep coming back to it's injury luck, a lot of it. Liverpool have had that because the injuries they've had have been to their most replaceable superstars like Alisson, Jota. I just watched Liverpool last night, and when Trent isn't playing and Mohamed Salah isn't in the mood, that team looks like nothing special. Just like Arsenal are looking like nothing special right now. That's how it goes. Which
I think it does. Really, like you said, I think it does come back to availability in those key periods. Even when you go back to the collapse in the top 4, when it was the defeat at Spurs and the loss at Newcastle, the defeat at Spurs, everyone got injured. Obviously, Holding got sent off, but I remember someone like Ben White did his hamstring. Gabriel got injured, didn't they? We had like Cedric was playing, Rob Holding was playing. Obviously, there was no Saliba, and then the following game against Newcastle, Holding
Ben White's on one leg.
Ben White was literally on one leg, and it was just at that time everyone just got injured at the same time, and obviously had a big impact. And like you said, the season afterwards, Saliba went down, and Arsenal just couldn't deal without him. So yeah, I think availability is key in those periods, and I think, like you said, it's the evidence suggests when you go back and look at them, they all tend to be around when certain players are missing, really important players are missing, that even the best teams struggle to deal with it. And like you said, unfortunately, we've got 3 months without the best player, potentially 3 months without our best player at the moment, and that goes back to what we just talked about for the first half of the show. It feels like they need to go and do something. We will probably come back next week. The derby's on Wednesday night, isn't it? So I imagine we'll be doing a sort of post-match reaction show on Thursday. So that's a week today. Would Arsenal have signed anyone by then?
No.
I would have to give you the same answer. I would say no as well, but we shall see. 7 days for them to prove us wrong. Anyway, it's been great to be back and to talking to you, mate. Real pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. As always, I'll be back in the morning to do the usual show. I'm then heading over to London Colney for Mikel Arteta's press conference. We'll try and record something after that as well. So busy day tomorrow. Cheers, mate. Good to speak to you, and I will catch you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.